On graduation day, my son embraced his mom's new husband first, said he was the reason I made it, and didn't mention me once. I applauded from the back row, quiet and still. That evening at the celebration, he handed me the catering receipt. I looked at him, let it drop to the floor before him, and walked out without a word. Oh man, let me tell you, there are some wounds you think you've buried deep. You build a whole new life, miles away from the pain, and you convince yourself that chapter is sealed, done. But then a letter arrives. And suddenly, you're 15 again, standing on a porch with a trash bag in your hands, the click of a lock burning into your soul. That click? It was my mother, slamming the door on me, telling me to figure it out myself. And that, my friend, was just the beginning of how she tried to erase me. My name is Henry, and I'm 32 now. I thought I'd put that version of me, the kid who waited for scraps of affection, behind me. I've got a steady job, my own apartment, people who actually pick up when I call. I don't spend my nights wondering why my own mom decided I wasn't worth the trouble. But yesterday a letter showed up. Not an email, not a text, but an actual, physical letter in her familiar, slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. No return address. Just my name. I almost didn't open it, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe something darker, made me tear it open. Inside was a flowery invitation to her 60th birthday party. And tucked in the card, a handwritten note, shaky but unmistakably hers. Henry, please come. I want you there. We need to talk. I sat at my kitchen table, that letter in one hand, coffee growing cold in the other, and felt my stomach twist into knots. Her? The same woman who locked me out at 15? Who never called, never looked for me, didn't show up to my high school graduation, or even send a happy birthday text. Now she suddenly wanted me at her party? The sheer audacity, the irony, stung like a wasp. My first thought was to toss it in the trash, just like she once did to me. But my hands wouldn't move. I kept rereading, "Please come," trying to hear her voice in those words, trying to decipher if it was desperation, guilt, or just another way to reel me back into her orbit. You see, my mom had a history of using people. It wasn't just me who got burned. My older sister, Lisa, walked away years before I did. My dad left when I was 8, and Mom made sure to paint him as the villain, but I know now he was just exhausted. Anyone who got too close eventually got drained, emotionally, financially, you name it. Mom had this way of turning people into tools. And when those tools broke, or just stopped being useful, she'd toss them aside. That's exactly what she did to me at 15. And yet, here I was, decades later, staring at this note like it was some kind of test. Like, if I went, maybe I'd finally get an explanation. Or maybe, just maybe, it was one more trick. One more setup. I kept remembering how, even as a kid, her apologies always had perfect timing. They always came when she needed something: rent, a piled-up bill, a car repair. She'd call me sweetheart or baby, just long enough to get help, then switch back to cold silence the second her needs were met. So, what was different now? Why this sudden birthday invitation, with a handwritten note that sounded like begging? I couldn't shake the thought. She didn't want me there for me. She wanted something from me. And if history had taught me anything, it was that with her, there was always a catch. I left the letter on my counter that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept hearing that lock click in my head, over and over, like it was happening all over again. Part of me wanted to march into that party and remind everyone who she really was. Another part wondered if this was some cruel joke, that I'd walk in and find nothing but her smug smile waiting. And maybe the most dangerous part, the part one hated admitting, was the small voice that still wondered if this time she meant it. If maybe, just maybe, she regretted what she did. But then I'd remember those nights I spent with my head pressed into Evan's couch cushions, wondering if anyone even cared if I made it through the week. And the anger flared back up, sharp and hot. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. Whatever she was planning, whatever game she thought she could play, I wasn't the same 15-year-old kid standing helplessly on that porch. If I went, it wouldn't be as the abandoned son with a trash bag in his hands. It would be as someone who finally got to decide what happened next. And maybe she wouldn't like the answer. The next morning, the letter was still there, half covered by unopened mail. The sight of it made my chest tighten, daring me to pick it up again. I made coffee, sat down, and tried not to look, but the words kept crawling back into my mind. Please come. We need to talk. I thought about just throwing it away, but my hands wouldn't do it. Not because I believed she was suddenly a changed person, but because a part of me needed to know why now. Why after all these years of silence? After birthdays missed, graduations ignored, and all those phone calls never returned? What had changed? When she locked me out at 15, I'd convinced myself I was too angry to care. But the truth is, it gutted me. I'd show up to school smelling like laundry detergent and stale couch cushions, pretending everything was fine. My teachers must have known something was off. How could they not? But nobody asked. Nobody really wanted to know. And my mom sure didn't come looking. I remember about 2 months after she kicked me out, I gathered the courage to knock on that same blue door. She opened it, saw me standing there, and the first thing out of her mouth wasn't, "How are you?" or "Come inside." It was, "What do you want?" Not even a question, more like an accusation. That memory resurfaced as I stared at her new invitation. The handwriting in the note was shaky now, not sharp and deliberate like it had been when I was a teenager. Age had caught up with her. 60. It sounded old, though in my head she was still the woman who slammed that door on me without flinching. The one who told me more than once that Lisa was the responsible one and I was just a handful. Lisa. I hadn't spoken to her in years either. She'd gone off to college a year before I was kicked out, and she made it clear she didn't want to be dragged into the mess between me and Mom. "Just keep your head down, Henry," she'd said on one of the rare nights we talked after I got thrown out. "Don't make things harder than they need to be." Easy for her to say, the golden child. Straight A's, polite smile, the kind of daughter parents bragged about. She didn't get handed a trash bag on the porch. She got care packages during finals week. That was Mom's way. Everything Lisa did was exceptional. Everything I did was disappointing. If I got a B, I was lazy. If Lisa got a B, the teacher must have been unfair. When I saved up for months working at the corner store to buy myself a used bike, Mom called it a waste of money. When Lisa got a car on her 18th birthday, Mom threw a backyard party. And now, decades later, I had the sneaking suspicion Lisa was involved in this invitation, too. The handwriting was Mom's, sure. But the planning? The printed card? That had Lisa written all over it. She was the organizer, the peacemaker, the one who always insisted family should stick together, which, in her language, meant Henry should fall back in line and stop making Mom look bad. I checked the envelope again and noticed something I'd missed before, Lisa's name, scribbled faintly on the back flap. So, it was her doing. She was the bridge, or at least she thought she was. I decided to call her. Against my better judgment, I dug up her number from an old contact list and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Henry." Her voice was cautious, almost rehearsed. "Yeah, got your little surprise in the mail," I said, keeping my tone even. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "I wasn't sure you'd even open it. Look, it's Mom's 60th. She's been asking about you." "I thought you thought what?" I cut her off. That after 17 years of radio silence, I'd just show up to eat cake and pretend none of it happened? Her pause was long. When she spoke again, her voice had that same sharpness I remembered. "You're still bitter. I knew you'd be like this." I'm not saying what she did was right, but people change, Henry. She's older now. She's different. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Different how? Did she suddenly remember she had 2 kids instead of 1? Or is she just running out of people to pay her bills? Lisa sighed. I could picture her pinching the bridge of her nose, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. She just wants to see you. That's all. She regrets things. Henry, don't you think it's time you stopped punishing her? Those words hit me harder than I expected. Punishing her. Was that what they thought I'd been doing all these years? Punishing her as if I'd chosen to stay away out of spite, rather than survival. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. You and I both know she doesn't regret it, I said quietly. She only regrets not having me around when she needs something. Believe what you want, Lisa snapped back, her patience finally cracking. But at least come. It's one night. You'll see for yourself. She hung up before I could answer. I stared at my phone, my pulse racing. That old familiar cocktail of anger and shame washed over me. Anger at them for twisting the narrative. Shame at myself for still caring what they thought. And underneath it all, a gnawing suspicion that Lisa was right about one thing. If I showed up, I would see for myself. But what I saw wouldn't be redemption. It would be manipulation. I could feel it already. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better instincts, I picked up. Henry. The voice was raspy, weaker than I remembered, but still undeniably hers. Mom. I froze, gripping the phone tighter. Yeah. There was a pause, then a soft, almost theatrical sigh. I wasn't sure you'd answer. It's been so long. It has, I said flatly. I miss you, sweetheart. Her voice trembled, but it felt rehearsed, like an actor fumbling for sympathy. I've made mistakes. I wasn't a perfect mother. The understatement made me want to laugh, but I bit my tongue. That's one way to put it. I'm older now, she continued. I don't want to leave this world with regrets. All I want is my family together again, at least for one night. Her words were heavy, deliberate, each one meant to tug at something inside me. But what struck me most wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say. No apology, no acknowledgement of the night she shoved me out the door. Just vague phrases about mistakes and regrets. I stayed silent long enough that she finally filled the gap. Please, Henry, do it for me. And there it was again. The request dressed up as a plea, but really an expectation. I could hear the edge in her tone, the assumption that if she asked long enough, I'd cave, that I'd fall back into place as the son who kept his mouth shut and showed up when needed. I ended the call quickly, muttering something about thinking about it. Afterward, I sat in the dark of my living room, the phone still in my hand, heart pounding. It was happening again. The favoritism, the manipulation, the rewriting of history. Lisa telling me I was punishing Mom. Mom pretending she just wanted family together. Not one of them willing to actually face what happened. And yet, I couldn't shake the pull of it. Not forgiveness, not love, but something else. Something closer to the need to finally drag the truth into the light. So I found myself thinking, maybe I will go. Not for them, but for me. To see with my own eyes what game they were playing this time. To see if my instincts were right. And deep down, I knew one thing. If I walked into that party, I wouldn't walk in quietly. The night of the party crept up on me faster than I expected. For days, I wrestled with myself. Should I go? Should I stay away? Should I write a letter instead? Should I burn the invitation? But every time I tried to push the thought aside, it returned, sharper. Not with longing, not with forgiveness, but with this unshakable sense that I had to see what they were up to. I didn't want to walk in hoping for closure. I wanted to walk in armed with clarity. When Saturday came, I drove across town in silence. Headlights carving through streets I hadn't been down in years. The closer I got, the more the memories crowded in. The peeling blue paint of the door, the muffled arguments late at night, the nights I waited for her approval like it was a prize that never came. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every block. The party was being held at a rented banquet hall, not at the old house. That surprised me at first, but then again, it made sense. Mom always loved appearances. A milestone birthday wasn't just about celebrating, it was about showing the world how loved and respected she was. I parked in the back lot and sat there for a moment, staring at the glow spilling out of the windows, listening to the muffled sound of music and laughter. My chest felt tight. Part of me wanted to drive away, but my legs moved anyway, carrying me toward the doors. Inside, the room was buzzing. Round tables draped in white cloth, balloons in gold and silver, people dressed up and mingling like it was a wedding reception. A DJ played old hits in the corner. I scanned the crowd and then I saw her. My mother. Standing near the center of the room in a dress far too elegant for her usual taste, holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something someone said. She looked older, yes, wrinkles tracing her face, her hair thinner, and dyed a shade too dark to look natural. But she also looked comfortable, confident, like the queen of her little kingdom. And then she saw me. Her smile faltered for half a second, just enough for me to catch it before she forced it wider and spread her arms. "Henry," she called out, loud enough that half the room turned to look. "My son." The words made me freeze. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Loud, performative, like she was announcing me to the crowd rather than greeting me. I walked closer, my steps heavy. She embraced me quickly, but it wasn't warm. It was staged. Her cheek brushed mine, and she whispered, just low enough for only me to hear, "Thank you for showing up. You have no idea how much I needed this." Needed, not wanted, not missed, needed. I stepped back and looked around. Lisa appeared from the side, smiling in that way that was half genuine and half managerial, like she was proud she'd pulled off some big reconciliation. "See," she said softly, patting my shoulder. "It's not so bad." I didn't answer. Instead, I found a seat near the edge of the room and watched. And what I saw made my stomach turn. Mom was working the room like a politician. Every time someone new came over, she'd gesture toward me and say, "This is my son, Henry. He's finally come back to us." As if I had wandered off on my own, as if she hadn't shoved me out the door with a trash bag in my arms. She never mentioned the years in between, never acknowledged the estrangement. To everyone else, it looked like a heartwarming family reunion. To me, it was a performance, one where I was the prop. I clenched my fists under the table, the anger simmering. I told myself I'd just stay an hour, endure it, and leave. But then came the moment that snapped something in me. The DJ's music faded, and Lisa walked up to the microphone. She tapped it lightly, the chatter in the room quieting down. If I could have everyone's attention, she began, smiling. "We're here tonight to celebrate our wonderful mom, a woman who has been the backbone of this family, who has sacrificed so much for us, and who continues to inspire us every single day." Applause rippled through the room. My jaw tightened. Lisa continued, her voice growing more emotional. "And tonight, we thought it would be special to not just celebrate her 60 years of life, but also to acknowledge the people who make her proudest, her children." She gestured toward me and herself. "Mom, we love you." I swallowed hard, bracing myself. And then it happened. She turned back to the microphone, her tone shifting into something rehearsed. "Many of you know our family hasn't always had it easy. There were challenges, times when we all had to make hard choices. But through it all, Mom held us together. Even when Henry," she paused, smiling at me like it was a compliment, "went through a rebellious phase and distanced himself, Mom never stopped loving him. She prayed every day he'd come back, and tonight, here he is." The room erupted in applause again. People turned to me, smiling, some even clapping me on the back, murmuring things like, "So glad you made it back." And "She must be so happy." I felt my face heat, not from embarrassment, but from rage. Rebellious phase? Distanced myself? That's what they were calling it. The night she shoved me out with a trash bag had just been rewritten into a story where I was the one who left, and she was the saint who waited patiently for my return. And Lisa, my sister, was the one delivering it, wrapping it up neatly with a bow for everyone to applaud. I sat there, frozen, every nerve in my body on fire. My mother looked at me with teary eyes as if to say, "Go along with it. Let them believe this story." She mouthed the words, "Thank you again," like I had just handed her the perfect gift. That was the betrayal. Not the trash bag. Not the years of silence. I had survived those. This was worse. This was erasure. This was them rewriting history in front of a crowd, painting me as the lost sheep who had finally come home, making her the long-suffering mother instead of the one who locked her child out on the street. I wanted to stand up and scream, to tell the whole room the truth, to drag out every ugly detail, every moment of neglect, every insult, every night I spent wondering if I mattered to her. My chest heaved with the urge, but my legs wouldn't move. Not yet. I caught Lisa's eyes across the room. She looked so proud of herself, so smug, as if she'd orchestrated the perfect redemption arc for Mom. And I was just another piece on her chessboard. That look lit something inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Not just anger, not just hurt, but resolve. Because in that moment, I realized something crystal clear. They weren't just asking me to come back. They were using me to rewrite the story, to absolve her, to make her look good. And I wasn't going to let that stand. Not anymore. The applause faded, but the ringing in my ears didn't. It wasn't just the sound of people clapping. It was the sound of my history being stolen, rewritten in real time, with smiling faces around me, nodding as if they knew the truth. I sat stiff in my chair, hands pressed flat against my thighs to keep them from trembling. My face must have looked calm to everyone else, but inside, I was splitting apart. Lisa stepped down from the microphone, her expression glowing with satisfaction, as if she had just pulled off some charitable miracle. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a grateful matriarch. Strangers and relatives alike leaned across tables, whispering about how touching it was, how inspiring. And there I was, the prop in the center of their performance, expected to smile, nod, and play along. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing, my chest so tight I thought I might collapse right there. I excused myself quietly, slipping through the crowd before anyone could stop me, and pushed out into the night air. The parking lot was mostly empty, the hum of the party muffled by the closed doors behind me. I leaned against the cool metal of my car and finally let out the breath I had been holding. My hand shook. The rage that had been simmering was replaced now by something heavier, something that settled in my stomach like a stone: defeat. For years, I had imagined what it would be like to face her again, to walk into a room and finally hear her admit what she had done, to see her break down and tell me she was sorry. And I hated myself for realizing that. Even as I told myself I didn't care, some small, foolish part of me still wanted that. Still hoped for it. Still believed maybe one day she'd say the words. But standing there in the glow of the parking lot lamps, I finally saw it clearly: she never would. In fact, she had done the opposite. She had turned me into her redemption story, paraded me in front of her friends as proof of her undying love, and let Lisa spin a narrative that erased my pain entirely. And I had let myself walk right into it. The shame burned hotter than the anger. How many times had I promised myself I would never give her that power again? And yet, the second I walked into that hall, I had handed it back to her, like a leash around my neck. I sank into the driver's seat of my car, hands gripping the wheel, but not turning the key. Instead, I sat there, staring through the windshield at nothing, replaying every word, every look. I thought about being 15 again, standing on that porch with the trash bag in my hands. Back then, I told myself I'd never go back, that I'd prove her wrong, prove I could make it without her. And I had. I'd built a life. I had survived. So why did it feel like I had just been thrown out all over again? The cruelest part wasn't even what she or Lisa said. It was how easily the room had swallowed it. Nobody questioned the story. Nobody asked me what really happened. In their eyes, I was the prodigal son, and she was the patient mother. The narrative was set, and I was powerless against it. I felt that old familiar ache settle in my chest, the same one I used to feel lying awake at Evan's house, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I mattered at all. The ache of being unseen, unheard, rewritten by someone else's version of the truth. I stayed in the car for what felt like hours. I don't even know how long it was. Long enough for the party music to swell, for laughter to spill faintly through the walls, long enough for the night air to grow colder, and for my resolve to start hardening into something else. At one point, Lisa texted me, "Where did you go? Don't ruin this for Mom. She's so happy you're here." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Don't ruin this for Mom. That line cut deeper than she knew. My whole life, that's what it had always been about. Don't upset her. Don't make things harder for her. Don't ruin her happiness. Meanwhile, my happiness, my pain, my existence, those had always been secondary, disposable. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the shame and rage stew together until they started to transform into something else. A thought crept in, small at first, but persistent. If they could rewrite the story once, what was stopping them from doing it again and again until the only version left was theirs? That terrified me more than anything. That one day, years from now, the only thing people would remember wasn't what actually happened, but the version my mother and sister performed in rooms like that one. That my suffering, my abandonment, would be reduced to a rebellious phase. That I'd go down in family history as the difficult son who came crawling back, and she'd be remembered as the mother who never stopped loving me. The idea hollowed me out. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, fighting back the sting in my eyes. It felt like I was losing myself all over again. Not just my place in their lives, but the truth itself. And then another thought surfaced, sharper this time. What if I stopped letting them control the story? What if, for once, I took it back? The idea was too raw to touch just yet, but it lingered. A possibility. A seed. I drove home that night without saying goodbye, without going back inside. The highway lights blurred past me as I gripped the wheel tighter, the silence of the car pressing against me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt drained, like I had poured out every ounce of anger and had nothing left but an empty shell. I collapsed onto my couch without even turning on the lights. The house was quiet, too quiet, and for the first time in years, I felt like that 15-year-old again, lost and unwanted. I hated it. I hated how easily they could pull me back into that place. For 4 days, I went through the motions, work, errands, small talk with neighbors. But underneath, I was unraveling. I avoided calls from Lisa, ignored the 2 voicemails Mom left, her voice trembling as she said things like, "I'm so glad you came, sweetheart." It meant the world to me. The words made my stomach turn. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene over and over, the applause, the way Lisa called it a rebellious phase, the smug look in her eyes, the way Mom mouthed, "Thank you." It broke something in me. Not because I expected better, but because I realized just how far they would go to protect their story, no matter how much it cost me. But as the days turned into a week, something started shifting. The shame began to recede, replaced by something colder, steadier. That seed of thought from the car began to sprout. If they wanted to play this game, rewriting history, parading me around as proof of her sainthood, then maybe it was time I stopped letting them. I wasn't ready yet, but I could feel it coming. Because as much as I had fallen that night, as humiliated and erased as I had felt, I knew one thing: I wasn't 15 anymore. I wasn't helpless. And if they thought they could keep control of the story, they were about to find out what happens when the forgotten son finally decides to speak. After that night, I didn't pick up when my mother called. I didn't text Lisa back. I didn't explain myself to anyone, not even to the mutual acquaintances who reached out to me afterwards, saying things like, "It was so nice seeing you there," or "Your mom looked so happy." Their words cut me at first, but then they started to roll off like water over stone. Because for once, I wasn't going to spend my energy defending myself or justifying my absence. Instead, I decided to put my energy somewhere else, into myself. The week after the party, I went back into work at the architecture firm where I'd been slowly climbing the ladder. I had a stack of projects waiting for me. Design revisions, meetings, deadlines. And I threw myself into them with a focus I hadn't felt in a long time. The betrayal from the party sat in me like a spark, fueling a quiet fire. Every time I remembered Lisa's smug smile or my mother's performative tears, I felt my back straighten, my focus sharpen. If they were going to erase me, then I'd make myself undeniable. Work had always been a refuge for me, but now it became something more, a way to reclaim control. I stayed late, fine-tuned every draft, went out of my way to anticipate problems before they arose. Clients noticed. So did my boss. Within 3 months, I had landed 2 new contracts for the firm. Big ones, the kind that put my name on people's radar. One evening, after presenting a design pitch that was approved without a single correction, my boss clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Henry, you've got a future here. Keep this up and you'll be running your own team in no time." The words settled deep inside me. Not because I needed his validation, but because it was proof that I could build something solid, something no one could rewrite or take credit for. Outside of work, I began investing more deliberately in myself. I started running in the mornings, something I had always told myself I didn't have time for. At first, I barely made it a mile without gasping for air. But day by day, it got easier. By the end of the month, I could run 5 miles without stopping. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. My apartment, once a place I came home to crash, slowly became a home. I repainted the walls, bought furniture that wasn't just functional, but something I actually liked. And for the first time in my life, I put up photos, pictures of places I'd traveled, of friends who had stuck by me, of the life I had built on my own. Every corner of that space whispered a truth I needed to hear. I wasn't the boy with the trash bag anymore. And as my life grew steadier, something interesting happened. People from my past started noticing. Evan, the friend whose couch I had crashed on when I was 15, reconnected with me. We grabbed dinner one night, and over burgers, he shook his head and said, "Man, I always wondered how you turned out. Look at you now. You've built something." That meant more than he probably realized. For years, I had carried this quiet fear that people remembered me as the kid who got thrown out, the stray. But now they were seeing me as I was, not as my mother's son, but as my own man. Even on social media, something I barely used, people noticed. A photo I posted of a building design I had worked on drew comments from old classmates, some of whom admitted they had no idea I'd even gone into architecture. One comment stood out though. It was from a cousin I hadn't seen in years. She wrote, "Your mom brags about you all the time. Says, you finally came back to the family. Glad you're doing well." At first, the words made my stomach twist again. Proof that my mother was still spinning her narrative. But instead of collapsing under it, I felt something different this time. Anger, yes, but focused. If she wanted to brag, fine. But she wasn't going to be the one holding the pen on my story anymore. I was. That thought pushed me further. I began keeping a journal. Not of my feelings, but of facts, memories, incidents. The night I was kicked out, the things she said to me, the ways Lisa covered for her. I wrote them all down, page after page. Not to dwell on the past, but to anchor myself to the truth. If they wanted to keep rewriting history, I was going to keep a record of it as it really happened. My record. Over time, that journal became more than just notes. It became a blueprint. I didn't know what exactly I was building toward yet, but I knew I needed to be prepared. If another moment came where they tried to use me, I wasn't going to walk in blind again. Meanwhile, success at work kept climbing. I was promoted to lead architect on a mid-sized project, a library renovation in the city. The day I signed the contract, I sat in the conference room alone afterward and just let the moment sink in. A kid with a trash bag for luggage had just signed off on a $1 million project. I should have been elated, and I was, in a way. But I also felt the faint shadow of something else. The echo of my mother's voice, the one that always told me I'd never amount to much, that I was reckless, lazy, too much trouble. That voice used to keep me up at night. Now, though, it only made me want to push harder. To prove, not just to her, but to myself, that she had been wrong. Around this time, Lisa reached out again. She sent a message asking if we could meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We sat across from each other in a cafe downtown, her in a tailored blazer, looking every bit the polished professional. She smiled too easily, like nothing had happened at the party. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I wanted to check in. Mom's been talking about you nonstop since the party. She was so happy you were there." I stirred my coffee, not looking at her. Happy enough to pretend she didn't throw me out when I was 15. Her smile faltered just slightly. "Henry, we were just trying to frame things in a way that wouldn't ruin the evening. You know how Mom is. She wanted people to see her as strong, as loving. So you lied." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Look, what happened back then, it was complicated. But the important thing is that you're back now. That we're a family again." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You don't get it. I'm not back. I showed up once. That's it." Lisa frowned. "Why are you always so defensive? Mom's getting older. She doesn't have much time left. Don't you want to make peace before it's too late?" Her words hung between us, heavy with implication. And that was when I saw it clearly. This wasn't about me at all. This was about convenience, about controlling the story before time ran out. They weren't reaching out because they wanted me. They were reaching out because they wanted what I represented: proof, validation, redemption. I walked out of that cafe more certain than ever. I wasn't going to give it to them. Instead, I went back to work, to my runs, to my journal. I poured everything into growing stronger. Not just financially, not just professionally, but emotionally. Every day that passed, I felt a little steadier, a little more rooted in myself. And slowly, an idea began to take shape. Not just to protect myself, but to turn the tables. If they wanted to use me as a prop in their story, maybe it was time I wrote a story of my own. One they couldn't twist, one they couldn't erase. I didn't know exactly how yet, but the rise had begun. It was a few weeks after the coffee with Lisa when the first piece of leverage practically fell into my lap. I hadn't planned it. Honestly, I was just trying to keep my distance, focusing on work and my own life. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. It started with a phone call from my cousin Emily. She was one of the few relatives I still kept in touch with, someone who had quietly broken away from the family's orbit years ago, though for different reasons. She lived 2 states over, built her own career, and only occasionally came back for holidays. "Henry," she said, her voice low and almost conspiratorial. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but your mom's been talking a lot to everyone. She's telling people you've reconnected, that you're helping her with some things." My stomach tightened. Helping her with what? Well, Emily hesitated. Money, for one. She's been saying you've finally stepped up. That you're taking responsibility now. Like you owe her or something. The words sent a chill through me. There it was again. Her favorite trick. Turning her failures into my responsibilities, twisting the story until she was the benevolent mother, and I was the wayward son paying penance. And now she was using my success as a prop, telling people I was footing her bills. "I haven't given her a dime," I said flatly. "I know," Emily replied quickly. "That's why I'm telling you. She's using your name, Henry, and not just in conversations. She told Aunt Carol that you're listed as her financial contact now. I don't know what that means exactly, but it sounds serious." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in stunned silence. My first instinct was disbelief. Surely, she wouldn't go that far. But with my mom, nothing was out of the question. She had always been skilled at weaving lies into something that looked just plausible enough to pass as truth. That night, I dug deeper. I still had Lisa's business card from the cafe meeting, and on the back of it was the firm she worked for. Out of curiosity, I searched for her firm online, browsed through their press releases, and almost by accident, stumbled across a charity gala they had sponsored. There in the photo was Lisa standing beside Mom. Both of them smiling, both of them shaking hands with donors. The caption underneath mentioned that Lisa and her family had the unwavering support of Henry, who recently rejoined them. My stomach flipped. Recently rejoined them. The lie was spreading beyond family whispers now. It was being published, used publicly. My name wasn't just being dragged into their narrative. It was being cemented into it. I printed out the article and stared at it for a long time. That was when the idea sharpened. If they wanted to use my name, my reputation, my success, then maybe it was time I took control of how my name was used. But I couldn't just march into their lives guns blazing. Not yet. I needed information, facts, proof. So, I started quietly gathering. I called a lawyer, someone I'd met through one of the firm's clients, and asked a few hypothetical questions. What happens if someone falsely claims you as a financial contact? Could they legally tie you into obligations without your consent? The lawyer's answer was clear: no, not without documentation. But, he added, if your name is being used without permission, you might want to get ahead of it. Establish a record. Paper trails are everything. That night, I began combing through every mention of my mother online, social media posts, charity newsletters, even church bulletins. And sure enough, my name kept popping up, always in vague, complimentary ways. Henry has been such a blessing. Henry's generosity shows how strong family bonds truly are. Lies dressed up as flattery, but lies nonetheless. Each time I found one, I printed it and slipped it into a folder I labeled receipts. It started as a thin stack. Within 2 weeks, it was an inch thick. The more I collected, the clearer it became. She was building a narrative not just for her friends, but for the community at large. She was rewriting me into a redemption arc, the prodigal son who had returned, successful and supportive. She was using my hard-earned life as her crutch, and Lisa was helping her do it. The thought burned. Lisa wasn't just complicit. She was an active participant, lending her credibility, her business connections, her polished veneer to the performance. She was the one legitimizing it. That realization cut deep. But it also gave me something I hadn't had before, a target. If Lisa was the bridge between Mom's lies and the outside world, then she was also the weak point. If I could break that bridge, the whole facade might crumble. Around this time, my work life reached another turning point. The library renovation project I was leading drew attention in the local press. Reporters interviewed me. Articles quoted me. Photos ran with my designs. Suddenly, I wasn't just an anonymous architect in a mid-sized firm. I was Henry, the lead behind a project that people were calling a cornerstone for the city's future. With that recognition came invitations, panels, community events, dinners with city officials. My name was circulating in circles far beyond anything my mother or Lisa had ever touched. And it hit me, this was my leverage. For years, they had held power over the story because they controlled the audience. But now I had an audience of my own. One that trusted me, not them. The shift was subtle, but I felt it in every interaction. People asked me questions, sought my opinion, listened when I spoke. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible kid waiting on the porch. I was the one standing inside, holding the microphone. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't broadcast what I knew. I didn't confront them yet. Instead, I built my foundation stronger. I made sure my name was solid, untouchable. I worked. I accepted speaking engagements. I poured myself into my work. Every article written about me went into the folder alongside the receipts. Not just proof of their lies, but proof of who I really was. And then one night, I got another call from Emily. "You should know," she said cautiously. "Mom's been telling people you're planning something big for her. Like a surprise. She says you're working on a project that's going to honor her." I felt my lips curl into a smile, not of amusement, but of something sharper. For once, her lie wasn't just insulting. It was useful. Because if people already expected me to be planning something for her, well, maybe I would. Just not the way she imagined. That was the moment I realized I didn't just have leverage. I had the perfect setup. She had given me the stage, handed me the microphone, and all I had to do was decide what story to tell when I finally stepped up to speak. And this time, it wouldn't be hers. Revenge, when it finally arrived, didn't come as a sudden spark. It wasn't impulsive or loud or messy. It was careful, measured, like watching the pieces of an intricate design fall into place, one line at a time, until the picture was clear. I had been patient. I had let them spin their lies, collect their applause, bask in their invented narrative. I had built my own foundation stronger and steadier, brick by brick, until I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I couldn't be undermined. And then I waited for the perfect opportunity. It came with another invitation. This time it wasn't a birthday. It was a community recognition banquet at the very church where my mother had spent decades curating her reputation as a saintly woman who sacrificed everything for her family. She was being honored with a Pillar of the Community award, nominated, no surprise, by Lisa. The irony was almost too much. The woman who once shoved her son out on the porch with a trash bag was now being held up as a model of selflessness. And to top it off, the program listed me, Henry, as one of the speakers. That was their mistake. I hadn't agreed to speak. Lisa must have added my name to the program without telling me, assuming I'd play along for appearances. After all, hadn't I already showed up once at the birthday party? Didn't I already let them parade me in front of their friends? Why wouldn't I do it again? They underestimated me. I showed up that night in a tailored suit, calm and collected, folder in hand. The church hall was full. Friends, relatives, local officials, members of the congregation. My mother stood at the front, soaking in the attention, Lisa flitting around like her handler, whispering instructions to volunteers. When I walked in, Lisa beamed. "Henry, thank goodness you made it," she said, tugging at my arm. "Mom's so excited. You'll go up after me. Just keep it short and sweet. Say something nice. Make her look good." I gave her a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Of course, I said smoothly. Inside, my heart was steady. For once, I wasn't the one on edge. They were. They just didn't know it yet. The program moved quickly. Speeches from church elders, a glowing introduction from Lisa, who painted my mother as the backbone of the family and community, the ever-sacrificing mother who never gave up on her children. I listened, expression neutral, while my folder sat heavy in my lap. Then my name was called. I rose slowly, the murmur of applause filling the hall. My mother's eyes glistened with stage tears, Lisa's smile tight with satisfaction. They thought they had me cornered, scripted, predictable. But I had come prepared. I took the microphone, let the room quiet, and began calmly. Good evening. My name is Henry. I am, yes, my mother's son. And tonight, I want to tell you a story. The audience leaned in. My mother's smile wavered just slightly. It's a story, I continued, about family, about truth, and about what happens when the version of a story you're told doesn't match the reality of the people who lived it. I paused, letting the words settle. My mother shifted in her chair. Lisa stiffened. When I was 15 years old, I said clearly, my voice carrying in the hall, my mother handed me a trash bag with my clothes in it, locked the door behind me, and told me to figure it out myself. I slept on a friend's couch for months. She never came looking. She never called. For years, I was told by this very family that I was nothing but a burden. Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned toward my mother. Her face froze in a tight smile, but her eyes were wide. I continued, steady and calm. But in recent months, I've discovered that while I built my life back from nothing on my own, without help, my name has been used. My story has been twisted. I've been painted as a rebellious phase, as the son who left only to return, proving my mother's endless love. That's the story you've been told. It is a lie. The room was silent now, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I opened the folder in my hands, sliding out the stack of printed newsletters, bulletins, and articles. These are examples, I said, holding them up, of my name being used without my consent to build a false narrative. My success has been paraded as proof of someone else's redemption. But the truth is simple. I owe my mother nothing. Every achievement I've earned came despite her, not because of her. And I will not stand here tonight and let this charade continue. A murmur spread across the hall, uneasy, confused. My mother's face had drained of color. Lisa's lips pressed thin. I closed the folder, set it down, and looked directly at my mother. You wanted me here as a prop, a symbol of your patience and love. But I am not your story to tell. I am not your redemption arc. I am my own man. And tonight, I'm reclaiming the truth. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone coughed. The sound sharpened the silence. A few whispers broke out. I handed the microphone back to the stunned host and walked calmly off the stage. Behind me, I could feel the weight of the hall shifting, eyes darting between me and my mother, whispers spreading like wildfire. The perfect performance she and Lisa had choreographed was unraveling in real time. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt the first real breath of freedom I'd taken in years. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't pounding. I felt steady, in control, because for the first time, I hadn't just endured. I had spoken. I had taken the story back. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The fallout hadn't come yet. But it would. When I stepped outside that night, the air was crisp, almost biting. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not because everything was resolved, far from it, but because I had finally said what needed to be said. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I hadn't broken down. I had spoken clearly, calmly, with evidence in hand. And then I had walked away. The weight of years spent silent had finally loosened its grip on my chest. But the real fallout began almost immediately. By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing with notifications. First, a call from Lisa, then a text, then another. The messages popping up one after another. What have you done? You humiliated her in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? Pick up the phone, Henry. We need to fix this. I didn't answer. I sat in my car, phone face down on the passenger seat, and let the silence swallow me. For the first time in my life, their urgency wasn't mine. Their panic wasn't mine. Later that night, Emily called me. She had been at the banquet. "Henry," she said, her voice low, but trembling with something I hadn't heard before, admiration. "I don't think you realize what you just did. You should have seen their faces. People didn't know where to look. Some of them walked out right after you finished." I leaned back in my seat, staring up at the dark sky. "Good," I said simply. Because that was the point, wasn't it? To break the illusion, to rip the mask off in front of the audience they had worked so hard to deceive. Over the next few days, the fallout only grew. Word spread quickly through the community. Some people called me brave. Others whispered that I had been cruel, airing family business in public. But no matter how they spun it, the truth was out. And the one thing my mother and Lisa couldn't do was stuff it back into the box. Mom tried, of course. She posted a long, tearful message on Facebook about family struggles and misunderstandings, painting herself once again as the victim. But instead of support, the comments were mixed. Some sympathetic, but many skeptical. A few even referenced my speech directly. Henry made some powerful points. Maybe it's time the truth came out. I could almost hear her screaming at the screen. Lisa, meanwhile, tried damage control. She called me again and again, her voicemails alternating between fury and pleading. In one, she snapped, "Do you realize you've ruined Mom's reputation? People at work are talking. They're asking me if the things you said are true. You've made us a laughingstock." In another, her tone softened. "Henry, please, we can fix this. Just make a statement. Say it was taken out of context. Say you were emotional. Mom can't handle this kind of stress. You know her health isn't great." But I didn't respond. I didn't have to. For once, the silence was mine to wield. At work, things only improved. If anything, my candor at the banquet seemed to amplify the respect I'd been earning. People saw me as someone unafraid to stand up for the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. One colleague even pulled me aside and said quietly, "What you did, that took guts. Most people spend their whole lives letting their families write their story. You took yours back." The library project moved forward flawlessly. My name appeared in another article. This one with no mention of my mother, no ties to her fabricated redemption arc, just me, Henry, standing on my own. But the real shift came about a week later when Lisa showed up at my office. I was in the middle of reviewing blueprints when my receptionist buzzed me. "There's a woman here to see you," she said. "She says she's your sister." For a moment, I considered telling her to send Lisa away, but something inside me said, "No, let her come." She walked in, her usual polished composure cracked. Her blazer was perfect, her hair neat, but her eyes betrayed her red-rimmed, frantic, darting around like a trapped animal. "Henry," she said, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, but didn't say a word. She sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to steady her voice. "You've destroyed everything. Mom won't leave the house. People at church are whispering. She can't even go grocery shopping without someone bringing it up. Do you understand what you've done?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her. I told the truth. If the truth destroyed everything, maybe it wasn't worth protecting in the first place. Her jaw clenched. "You don't get it. This family, we've always had to hold up appearances. It's how Mom survived. It's how we all survived. And you," she pointed at me, her voice rising, "you just tore it all down in one night." I let the silence stretch before replying. "No, Lisa. Mom tore it down 17 years ago when she locked her son out with a trash bag. All I did was stop covering for her." She flinched, but quickly composed herself. "Fine, if that's how you want it. But don't think this won't come back to you. People will remember what you did. They'll think you're vindictive, heartless." I cut her off, my voice calm but sharp. "No, they'll remember that I spoke the truth while everyone else was too afraid to. And if they call that heartless, so be it. I'd rather be heartless than a liar." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't the kind that came from pain. They were the kind that came from losing control. She stood abruptly, smoothing her blazer with shaking hands. "You'll regret this," she muttered. "No," I said, leaning forward, my gaze steady. The only regret I have is not doing it sooner. She left without another word. That was the last time I saw either of them. Mom never called again. Lisa sent one final email, a terse message that said simply, "Don't come to the funeral when the time comes. You're not welcome." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. I didn't need their invitations. I didn't need their approval. Because here's the thing, revenge wasn't about making them suffer. Not really. It was about taking back what was stolen from me. My voice. My truth. My story. And I had done that. Months later, the library I had designed opened to the public. The mayor gave a speech. Cameras flashed. My name was etched onto a plaque at the entrance, Lead Architect Henry Carter. I stood there surrounded by colleagues, friends, and strangers who respected me for who I was, not who I had been told to be. As I ran my hand over the cool metal of that plaque, I thought about the trash bag, about the porch, about the 15-year-old boy who had believed for so long that he wasn't worth anything. And then I thought about the man I had become. The final line of the ceremony still rings in my ears. The mayor had looked at me and said, "Henry, you've built something that will last, something that will outlive us all." I smiled, not for the cameras, not for the crowd, but for myself, because in the end, that was the real revenge. My mother and Lisa had tried to write me out of the story, but I had written myself back in, louder, stronger, undeniable. And unlike their lies, this story would last. So, tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have found a different way to reclaim your truth? I really want to know what you think.